Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Buffalove podcast. I'm Dylan, and today we have a really special episode lined up for you. We're tackling a topic that's more relevant to everyday life than most people realize, and that is intimate partner violence, or as researchers call it, IPV. Now, before you think that doesn't apply to me, I want you to pause for a second. Think about the last time you had a heated argument with someone you were close to. Maybe things got a little out of hand. Maybe words were said that you regretted. Now ask yourself, when does normal relationship conflict cross a line into something harmful? That's exactly the kind of question we are going to be unpacking today. Now here's something that might actually surprise you. Conflict in relationships is completely normal. Disagreements are a natural part of any relationship, and research even suggests that arguments, when handled well, can sometimes strengthen a relationship. But sometimes, conflict escalates into something far more serious. It becomes violent, and that's where IPV comes in. So let's define it clearly for everyone listening. Intimate partner violence refers to physical, sexual, psychological, or emotional harm inflicted by a current or former romantic partner. We're talking about things like hitting and physical force, sexual coercion, threats and intimidation, as well as emotional abuse. And the consequences are serious. We're talking physical injury, deep psychological trauma, and lasting damage to a person's well-being and their relationships. And this is not a rare problem. IPV affects people across all walks of life, across all cultures, income levels, and age groups. Globally, research suggests that roughly 1 in 3 women has experienced some form of intimate partner violence in their lifetime. Even here in Singapore, it is more common than people assume, and it often goes unreported because of stigma, cultural expectations, or simply because people don't realize what's happening to them as violence. That's exactly why conversations like this one matter. Now here's something that the research is really clear about. Not all IPV is the same, and this distinction matters a lot. Researchers draw an important line between two types. The first is what's called situational violence, which is conflict that escalates in the heat of the moment and is often mutual between partners and tends to be lower in severity. The second is characterological violence, which is rooted in one person's need for dominance and control over the other. This type is more severe, more chronic, and far more dangerous. Now, why does this distinction matter? Because each type has different causes, different warning signs, and most importantly, needs completely different responses and interventions. And that brings us to the bigger picture of today's episode. IPV is what researchers call a multi-level problem, meaning that it cannot be explained by just one thing. It emerges from an interaction of factors happening at multiple levels simultaneously. At a cognitive level, which refers to our individual thoughts and mental states, we are looking at things like aggressive thinking patterns and impaired judgment. Secondly, at the relational level, which is what happens between two people in a relationship, we are examining things like poor conflict management and ineffective communication. And lastly, at a structural level, which refers to the broader society we all live in, we are talking about gender norms, power imbalances, economic inequality, and cultural expectations that can create conditions for violence to develop and persist over time. Today's episode explores all 3 of these levels through 3 fascinating research studies, each of which approaches IPV from a completely different angle. And to help us make sense of all of this, we have a very special guest joining us today, Professor Joshua Redford, a psychology professor here at UB. Professor Redford spends his time helping students understand the scientific foundation of human behavior and relationships, and we are really excited to have him sit down with us later on in this episode. We'll be asking him to share his perspectives on the research that we are covering today, what it means for real relationships, and what he thinks students and young people especially should understand about IPV that they might not already know. We think having an educator like Professor Redford as our guest makes a lot of sense for this episode, because one of the most powerful things we can do when it comes to IPV is to understand it better, and that is exactly what it's all about today. So over the duration of this podcast, we'll be taking you through the research, sitting down with Professor Redford, and wrapping up some reflections on what it all means. Our hope is that by the end of this episode, you will walk away with a clearer, more grounded understanding of IPV, whether you're a psychology student or simply someone who cares about healthy relationships. With that, let me hand things over to Valerie and Gwyneth, who's going to walk us through the 3 studies we've been looking at and what they tell us about IPV, what happens and what we can do about it.
Before we talk to our guests, we look at 3 different studies to understand why intimate partner violence happens. What's interesting is that each study looks at it from a different level: relationship, individual thinking, and societal factors. One study by Bradley and colleagues looked at whether improving relationship skills can actually reduce violence between couples. They conducted a randomized control trial with low-income couples who had experienced what they call situational violence, meaning a violence that comes from conflict getting out of hand rather than one partner trying to control the other. The couples went through a relationship program where they learned skills like communication, conflict management, and emotional regulation. What they found was interesting. The program didn't directly reduce violence at first, but it improved relationship skills, and those improved skills then led to a decrease in violence. So the key takeaway is that for some couples, violence isn't about control, but about poor conflict management. And that means it can actually be prevented with the right skills. The second study by Eckhart and colleagues focused on alcohol and why it's often linked to aggression in relationships. They ran a lab experiment where participants were either given alcohol or not, and then put into a situation where they could behave aggressively toward their partner. What they found was that alcohol didn't directly cause aggression. Instead, it made people focus more on provocative cues like feeling insulted and less on consequences. This led to more aggressive thoughts, and those thoughts were what actually drove aggressive behavior. So in simple terms, alcohol acts more like a disinhibitor. It lowers self-control and allows aggressive thinking that's already there to come out.
The third study by Sinhua and colleagues looked at a much bigger picture: how social and structural factors influence violence over time. They studied over 4,000 married adolescent girls in India using longitudinal data, meaning they tracked changes over several years. They found that girls with less decision-making power, lower autonomy, and who lived in environments where violence is seen as acceptable were more likely to experience increasing levels of abuse over time. On the other hand, having more autonomy and decision-making power reduced the risk. This suggests that people don't always stay in abusive relationships because they want to, but because they feel like they don't have any other options. When we looked at all these 3 studies together, a clear pattern emerges. Violence isn't just caused by one thing. It happens across multiple levels. At the relationship level, poor communication and conflict skills can escalate arguments into violence. At the individual levels, factors like alcohol can increase aggressive thinking and reduce self-control. At the societal level, norms, power imbalance, and lack of alternatives can make people more vulnerable and less able to leave. So, instead of asking why this happened, it is more accurate to say that violence is the result of multiple interacting factors. Now that we have looked at what the research says, it is important to see how these ideas actually play out in real life. So, let's hear it from our guest.
Okay, so hi everyone, welcome back to our Buffalove podcast, and today we are here with our guest, Professor Joshua Redford. Yay! Okay, so Professor Redford, can you please introduce yourself briefly?
My name is Joshua Redford. I'm an instructor for the SIMUB program, and I specialize in psychology, metacognition with interest in AI.
Okay, so do you have any experience with like conflict or inter-partner violence? Like maybe not just personal experiences, but stories you've heard?
Yes. When I've asked students to provide experiences of discrimination in the past, and kind of relevant to this, one interesting experience I've had is males reporting on how police default to assuming they're the guilty party in instances of domestic abuse.
Oh, okay. So, in your experience as like in metacognition and education, right? So, how does that like play a part in how people deal with conflict in close relationships?
I would say probably the biggest contribution from metacognition is appreciating the value of meta perspective when you're having a conflict with someone. And what that means is you don't just approach a conflict with what you want to get out of it, but you think about the conflict from their perspective, what their concerns are, what their goals are, what their motivations are, and that can help a lot.
Okay.
So like from a psychological perspective, right, why do you think like conflict in close relationship actually escalate quickly? Like, is there a reason behind why like the escalation like be like sudden, or like due to like maybe a small thing, like just verbal argument, or like maybe like a big physical fight?
I think that would reflect a buildup over time where people either voice their concerns and they feel as though it's not respected or not adequately addressed by the partner, or they just hold on to their grievances, their frustrations until it boils into an explosion. It bottles up and then it explodes. And it looks like a trivial thing led to that explosion, but it's probably because it's a series of situations that eventually just reached a breaking point.
Okay.
Do you think it's like different, like in Singapore's context compared to like back in the United States? Like, is it the same throughout, or is there any like minor differences between how people deal with conflict there?
I think there's definitely culture mediating factors. So specifically with Singapore versus US,
Yep.
I would say in the US, probably you won't have as much bottled up because you're more comfortable talking about what you're unhappy with, whereas maybe you feel less comfortable expressing what you're unhappy with in Singaporean context. I'm guessing. I don't know.
Okay.
My wife is Singaporean and she doesn't have trouble expressing what she's unhappy with.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Okay, so do you think that like maybe that would play a part in how fast a conflict escalates? So maybe perhaps in Singapore, because we bottle up a bit more, so a small trigger is more likely to escalate a conflict rather than in the United States where it's a bit different.
I think so. I think if I've gone through 10 instances of I'm not going to say anything, I'm not going to say anything, the 11th time I'm going to have a reaction that's overblown to that particular moment, but is reasonable when you think about,
Okay.
the grand scheme of things.
Okay, so now I'm gonna show you a skit. It's something that we created with the goal being to like simulate how conflict and intimate partner violence happens in Singapore, and there are many scenes throughout the skit itself, which I hope that maybe you can try to help us to like dive in to see what the perspectives of each character maybe in the skit is feeling and why they are feeling that way, and maybe possible triggers as to what triggered this kind of reaction in the first place.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
Your boyfriend?
Yeah.
Why? Just break up ah.
Not that simple leh.
Why it's not simple? Just break up.
It's a bit hard.
You never listen to me
I'm listening, you just shouting.
because you don't care.
That's not true.
You understand? Can you please stop talking so much? You're always making things worse, understand or not?
Okay.
We can go out together.
After school? I cannot lah.
Why cannot?
I no money ah.
No money or it's your boyfriend not allowed?
Aiya, you know one lah.
Who are you texting?
Just a friend.
You don't need to talk to them so much, really. Stop going after class, okay, with them. Understand?
Okay. You know every time we argue, right, it just gets worse,
Do you try to talk it through with him?
Hey, don't drink so much. We still need to go out tomorrow.
Okay.
Don't drink so much.
Stop telling me what to do! Even my own mother don't even tell me what to do. Don't you say that again.
Okay.
I thought you can just leave.
It's not just that.
Then, what is it?
everything it's like my situation and how we deal with things.
How do you find it?
You know what's funny is at the beginning,
Yeah.
I didn't realize they were all part of the same story.
Oh, okay.
Separate vignettes.
Yeah, but how do you find the video? Was it entertaining?
Yeah, it was fine. It was fine.
Okay, so like, let's start with like, why can't she leave? Like, clearly it's not a very healthy relationship, right?
Yeah, I think a couple of things factor into this. I think, what some other things I would expect her to say is, I love him,
Mm-hmm.
and, he regrets what he does, she'd say things like that. The other thing is, he didn't start off this way, it was a gradual
Mm-hmm.
build-up, right? He didn't, date number one, he's not grabbing her hair,
Yeah.
And so when you have that gentle build-up, or that gradual build-up, I don't want to say gentle, gradual build-up of aggression, that's what kind of ties the person or handcuffs the person together. And then, the financial dependence and so on. So what I would recommend in this situation is she should talk to her family, elaborate on what's going on behind the scenes, because, my family likes him would no longer be a consideration if she told them how she's being treated. And I think on the friend side of things, what the friend is doing is probably erring on the side of blaming the victim. Why won't you leave, kind of thing, putting it on her shoulders. Whereas, a better approach by the friend would be, offering up resources for the friend. Like, you need a safe place to stay. You can stay with me. Helping the friend figure out, what to do about the sister's education and things like that. Offering up not just verbal prodding to break up with them, because that doesn't help if you feel hopeless in that situation, but offering up, pathways out of the relationship.
Okay. So, do you think like maybe there is something deeper that maybe she's not looking for these solutions herself, like the main character? Is she not looking for these solutions herself, or do you think maybe subconsciously she doesn't want to leave?
No, I think she definitely wants to leave. I think it's an issue of learned helplessness.
Learned helplessness.
Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe she's fooling herself into thinking he'll change, which is a common mistaken thought people have.
Okay.
Do you think there is like other ways that a couple will like argue other than just like, oh, they argue because I don't want you to go out with your friends? Is it because like there's maybe like possessiveness of their partner?
Yeah, I saw him. he certainly. I mean, it was pretty heavy-handed in the video. He's possessive. He also did a little bit of gaslighting. I saw in the very beginning. So that was going on. And on his side of things, certainly it was all intentional. I mean, I imagine it's too limited information to say, but I would imagine he fits the profile of a narcissistic personality disorder kind of guy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you think like maybe his upbringing, his development from childhood that played a part into why he became like this, or could it just be from like small arguments that build up inside him?
No, this has not necessarily childhood origins, but there's something either environmentally in the background or genetically. It's not something that occurred organically from this relationship. I think his character is the type of character that would become this in any kind of relationship.
I see. Okay. So like you're saying he's already has this tendency to get violent, like in a way.
Right. And I think she has a tendency to become helpless in the relationship too.
Okay.
So not every woman or man would fall into this trap of I can't leave him. You know, it's people less resilient, maybe with a background of past situations they couldn't escape and so on and so forth.
Okay. So I want to break down that video even further. So we have 3 scenes, right? So our first scene, the car scene, all right, it is more to tackle like issues of communication skills because they were just shouting at each other, no one's really listening. So in your opinion, right, what would be like a better way to communicate in a conflict situation like this rather than shouting? I mean, shouting is quite emotional at that point.
My feeling is he's not interested in communicating better. He's interested in winning the argument. And that was my take on that one was he was, why are you shouting so much and so on. He's just basically using that as an excuse to kind of prevent her from talking at all. You know? So making her feel like she anything she says is just intentionally being annoying to him and so on and so forth.
Okay.
But his is a power dynamic then, not a relationship health.
Power dynamic, like can you elaborate like in what?
He just wants to control the relationship.
Okay.
And he, I mean, I don't think it would be a surprise to him that he's not interested in a healthy relationship. He's interested in a I own you kind of possession relationship.
Okay.
Is it like very similar? Like people these days tend to comment this as an alpha beta relationship.
Yeah, no, that has definitely led to toxic masculinity and so on. I don't think I feel like it's not any worse than it always has been. It's just, it's gotten more attention.
Is there like a reason behind why they become like so toxic? Like why they want to be space?
Could it be like the rise of feminism is challenging the masculinity?
Correct.
Or any reasons you could think of?
I wouldn't say that. Femininity gets a bad reputation, unfortunately, because people that are hostile sexists mistakenly assume that people use the ideology to control men and so on. I would say the most common origin for this would be low self-esteem among women.
Low self-esteem among men.
Yeah.
Okay.
If men are confident, then they don't struggle with femininity or feminism or an equitable relationship with their partners.
Okay.
It's men that have sensitive egos, they're struggling with low self-esteem, that they feel as though they have to personify the so-called alpha male.
Okay, because in my opinion, right, I felt like it was more of low self-esteem of the female instead of the male. Because if she was confident of herself, in my opinion, she could have just left. She didn't need him around.
I agree with you. I think they both have low self-esteem.
So it's like a negative feedback loop. Just keep going, and that's why you're getting worse.
Right. Okay. So yeah, if she was confident, she would demand better of him. Failing that, which she wouldn't get. Failing that, she'd leave. On his end, his low self-esteem comes in the form of I need to be the dominant person in this relationship.
Okay. So would you say that's like a common pattern across like toxic relationships in general? Like they're both of low self-esteem?
That's a good question. I I would say so. I would say so because if you have a complete accurate view of yourself and not suffering with self-esteem issues, that prevents you from feeling the need to protect your self-esteem. So, for instance, if someone comes to you and says, I feel like you're not caring about me because you forgot my birthday or something. If I have low self-esteem, I'm going to take that more likely as an attack on my person. But if I have high self-esteem, I can be more comfortable taking what I said before about the meta perspective and recognizing, I can see how that would make you feel devalued and striving to, apologizing in the interest of addressing the problem rather than apologizing to try to get past it and get away from the unpleasantness of my being attacked or something.
Okay. So now we move on to the next scene. So the next scene was the lift lobby scene. So he was possessive, and that is kind of showing like society in general, like the structure of society in a way that like in gender roles, men tend to be more like controlling, like stereotypically, of women. Like they can choose what women can or cannot do. So how do you think like we can break this structure such that she will not feel pressured by society to conform to her boyfriend's thoughts?
Well, it's an interesting way you ask the question because I don't feel like it's her job to do that. I think it's his job to have a healthier view of female independence. And I think this, again, it does come from that low self-esteem. If Guy's partner says, I want to hang out with my friends or I'm having a conversation with someone, if you have confidence in yourself, you're not going to worry about So I think it's either low self-esteem, like you could lose this person or there are people better for her than you, or maybe it could be projection, like you're cheating on her and you think you're projecting on her. It could be that too.
Okay.
But I don't think it's projection with him. I think it's low self-esteem.
Okay, so you think that maybe with her low self-esteem, societal pressures or like stereotypes will be even more pressurizing for her because she can't break out of it herself?
Ask again.
So because I mentioned just now, like stereotypically men are the dominant one in a relationship. So because of her low self-esteem, she cannot break out of that cycle. So when a man is trying to be dominant, she just thinks it's normal and she just doesn't stand up for herself because to her that's what it should be.
Yeah, I mean that I don't think that's related to low self-esteem, but that's a big problem. Is you think that it's the possessiveness, the jealousy, the controlling are extensions of love, which they're not. But that can be a problem. Is you misattribute those as that because he really loves me or he really cares about.
Do you think society in general has that problem?
I wouldn't say it's a societal problem. It's because if it was a societal problem, that'd be kind of depicted as norm in media and everything else. I think it's the individual problems.
Okay. So the next scene, which is the alcohol scene. So the alcohol scene actually came from the article. So the article discussed how alcohol is just a removal of filters for someone. So if they have negative tendencies to already be a violent person, removing those filters will make them act upon those violences. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I think that's accurate. It also gives both of them an excuse for the inappropriate behavior. So it's the alcohol rather than his behavior.
Okay. Do you think maybe alcohol is the cause of violence?
No, it's more of giving him an excuse to do the violence. I think he eventually would do that anyway, like grabbing her hair. The alcohol may have expedited that behavior, but it's going to happen eventually, with or without alcohol.
Oh, okay.
And I think in this kind of relationship, especially with her financial dependence on him, and feeling as though she doesn't have a support network from her family and so on, the violence is just going to keep escalating, alcohol or no alcohol.
Okay, so you don't think alcohol is that big a factor in this at all?
Nah. I mean, it's not helping the situation, but I don't think it's a factor.
Okay.
Actually, like you watch the whole video, right? Actually, in the video, it displays that the man is the one that is always displaying the violence.
Mm-hmm.
In actual society, do you think that there's actually an opposite whereby it's the woman that's abusing the male?
Oh yeah.
Do you think it's common in today's society that it actually happens?
Yeah, and I think it's unfortunate because it's harder for men to seek support because there's a lot more shame if you're being abused by your female partner. But last I saw it, it's a pretty large, like over 40% of all domestic abuse cases are where the woman is abusing the man.
Yeah. Do you think if we were in the friend's shoes, what can we do to support both sides? If I was a friend of the guy, maybe how can I try to help him?
Right. So for on the woman's side, it's what I said before about you can stay at my place or just getting distance between the two. Maybe do what you can on that front. Confront the family with the reality of the situation. But so if I was assuming I know what the guy is doing as a male friend.
Would you just not have that friend?
No. I don't. In this hypothetical scenario, am I friends with both of them or just friends with him?
Let's do both. What would you do if you were friends with him?
If I'm friends with both of them, it's more direct. I just intervene and say you can't do this to her. You can't be treating her this way. You're going to lose her. She's going to leave you. Whatever.
Okay.
If I'm just friends with him, I think I'd do the same thing, but I feel as though.
Would you what if he brings the argument? It's not your place to tell me that you're not in a relationship. You don't know what's going on. What if he throws this at you, but you have seen instances of him being abusive? How would you tackle it?
I think I'd say it's my place because you're committing a crime. I think I'd say something like those lines.
So assault, you're trying to back on the legal aspect.
But I think if I was friends with both of them, I'd take a more direct intervening hand and get her away from him. I feel more comfortable doing that. If I'm just friends with him, I don't feel as though I wouldn't be as comfortable getting into that.
Okay. So, what if we take the friend hat off? What if now you're their therapist? Let's say the two of them are in counseling. As a doctor yourself, how would you try to, help them get out of this situation?
If I was that's not my area of expertise. But if I was a therapist, I feel as though in front of both of them, I just kind of model and encourage positive communication and so on and so forth. But meeting with them separately, I think I'd probably take a very, very strong stance that she needs to get away from it because the pattern is very clear what happens.
Okay, but so far we've always been talking about getting her away, right? How about do you think like is there a cure for him so that he doesn't do this in his next relationship?
I think probably anger management therapy. Yeah.
Okay.
Assuming it's not a low self-esteem thing, right? It's just he's unhealthy in how he expresses his anger. Getting him to appreciate, that self-defeating, doing what he's doing, right? And not just don't do this, don't do that, because that's not the best way to change behavior. Giving him the tools, the healthy ways to express himself.
Okay, like besides anger management, do you think maybe he can do other things? Probably maybe since you mentioned that alcohol is like escalating factor, right? Should he just stop alcohol so that it doesn't get there? Or do you think that doesn't really matter because you said alcohol didn't really make a difference? Is there any measures he can take himself rather than going for long-term classes?
I would say he probably should, at least in the short term, avoid alcohol because it does make him have worse impulse control and so on. I think what I'd recommend for him that would help him is having kind of like Alcoholics Anonymous has a spokesperson. I'm not saying Alcoholics Anonymous for him, but he needs a third party that he can talk to, express his dissatisfaction, whatever.
Okay.
And then maybe they can portray the relationship in a more, objective fashion. Whereas he feels as though she's undermining him or challenging him, and having a third party saying she's not doing that. She's just expressing concern for you or something like that. Why not?
Okay. Then do you agree if he says I know what I'm doing is wrong, but I can't help it, I just feel this way? How would you deal with it?
Well, no, I think that's a cop-out answer so that they don't have to try to change.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's an excuse.
Right. Yeah. I don't like the guy, but Dr. Phil had a good line about this, which is if you had a shock collar on and you got blasted with electricity every time you did whatever he does, so grabbing her hair, you wouldn't do it anymore. So it's not a I can't change kind of situation.
Okay.
That being said, I would not have high hopes that this guy would change. I think he's kind of set in his ways, and he'd rather just find another female victim than change for her. Okay,
so you think this man ultimately can never be in a healthy relationship?
That's why I'm not a therapist. But I would say the likelihood is pretty low.
Okay.
Based on what I've seen.
Okay, since you mentioned that he won't change, right? Is there a possibility that we can help these people? Maybe what you said, they can go for therapy, anger management, right? But is there any other way to educate these people on how they can better help themselves, maybe emotionally?
Yeah, they're more in touch with their emotions themselves.
So that they will behave like that.
Well, I think there's higher hope for her than for him. Getting her to recognize what she deserves in a relationship, getting her to recognize the warning signs early on, getting her to recognize that she's not trapped, she's not, helpless in this situation. That's an easier hill to climb than to do away with this tendency towards the alpha male, toxic masculinity kind of thing.
Okay.
But
maybe since you talk about you're into education, right? Is there any way you can educate people from young of how to deal with conflicts in future?
Yeah, I mean, empathy is something that you can definitely strengthen in anybody. So it would be easier for him if he was younger, right? He's older. He's kind of really fixed in how he perceives his social reality and everything else. But you start with empathy, start with, how do you think the other person feels,
So I think that's the end of our podcast. Okay, we've come this talk for quite long, but I just want to leave you one final question. So, if you could change one thing about how people think about conflict, like in today's world now, among people, your friends, maybe your students, what would you say to them to change their perspective of conflict and how they would deal with it?
Oh yeah, I'd say it's not about winning or losing. It's about finding that compromise. And when you're in a relationship, be prepared to sacrifice. Both parties should be willing to sacrifice for the other person. So if you need them to give you more time one week to do something at work or whatever, you should be entitled to expect that from your partner, but also recognize that you have to pay it back later on. The give and take. And I think as long as you're focused on the equity of the relationship, then it's a healthy situation.
Okay, so conflict should not be avoided. Should always be tackling the issue, not the person. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I'll give you an example. And as long as and the other thing I'd say is, it's not my line, but it's a good line, which is it's not you versus them, it's you two against the world kind of thing. So never take, even if you disagree with something like they had a fight with their boss, never take the boss's side. It's you and them against the situation. But so I'll give an example with a recent conflict I had in my marriage. Is without too many details, but the wife felt like I wasn't being supportive about something. She said she felt pressure to do A instead of B, and from my perspective, and I shared this with her, it's not my place to tell her do A or B. Mm-hmm. So she took my neutrality as kind of an implicit encouragement to do the one and not the other. And so I had to explicitly recognizing, where she's coming from. I didn't take offense at her being upset. I didn't take offense about her misinterpreting my stance. So what I said is, I'm okay with either, but then recognizing what she needed me to be a little bit more encouraging of her doing plan B kind of thing. So I just made it more explicit about encouraging her to do that.
So, in a nutshell, you just have to subtly support her in what she originally wanted to do.
Pretty much. It's marriage.
Okay. Well, that's the end of our podcast. Thank you so much for coming on and giving us your expert insights.
Okay. So I have a question for you guys then. Let's finish up. If you were her parents.
Her parents, okay.
Yeah. What would you do in this situation?
For me, I make sure my daughter leave this man instantly.
But she's paying for your other daughter's education.
If I have to do something else to make sure my daughter's, ensure my daughter's safety, I would. Because at the end of the day, she's my own blood. Something that came out from me.
Okay.
So, maybe from a motherly point of view, I wouldn't want my child to go through, things that she shouldn't be going through. Where she can be happy, she shouldn't go through, violence and be sad. If the family is actually okay. But, likewise, if the circumstances of the family is bad, the parents are not healthy, in a healthy relationship, living condition is not the best, then of course, for me, I feel like it will change how my daughter is if she's going to, grow up.
Well, I think the fact that the family likes him suggests that she grew up in a very machismo kind of family. What about you?
Okay. If I were her parents, I would, and I know of this, I believe she will try to hide this as much as possible as well. Right. But when I find out of this, right, I think that will change my whole opinion of the guy. Mm-hmm. And because the context mentioned that I'm on good terms with the guy, right, I'll talk to the guy directly and try to identify what is the issue, why is he doing this. And if I see that, like you said, he's set in his ways, he's not gonna change, then I'm gonna break it off for her so that she doesn't have to go through it with him.
Yeah.
Then in terms of the financial aspect of like the other daughter's education, I don't know, I have to just find ways. I cannot prioritize one daughter over the other.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the other daughter would feel the same way. She'd say, it's not worth my sister going through this.
So now that you are a parent, how would you deal with it?
In a less healthy way than you. No, I'd probably be physical. I mean, how could I not? You know, if Paige was getting her hair pulled and so on, I would not be very, very high-minded
you were
about
previously on good terms with him, so how does that? Yeah, how can you suddenly one day when you walk up to your house just give him one good talk?
I think if I was on good terms with him, it probably wouldn't go physical. It would just be a matter of fact. There'd be no let me understand you. There'd be no correction. It's just you're never going to see my daughter again. It's it's over. Outcome collector things. Yeah, she's out of your life.
Okay.
That's probably what I do.
Okay.
And the mistake that I think a lot of people would make with her is, the blaming of it. Why didn't you leave him and so on?
Mm-hmm.
She's already going to be struggling with the shame of the situation. It's not helping the situation to make her feel even worse about herself. And then,
Okay. Well, thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you for all your insights.
That was fun.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've come to the end of our podcast. So to conclude, the research findings and our interview point toward one shared conclusion. Intimate partner violence is often less about the disagreement itself and more about how conflict is cognitively and emotionally interpreted by both partners. As highlighted by Eckhart et al., alcohol does not simply create aggression. Instead, it heightens aggressive conditions in the moment, such as hostile interpretations, revenge-oriented thoughts, and a narrowed focus on provocation. This strongly aligns with our guest's perspective that alcohol is not the root cause of violence, but rather an accelerant that speeds up an already existing dysfunctional conflict style. In other words, if the underlying relationship dynamic is already toxic, alcohol may intensify the speed and intensify with which partners move from disagreement to aggression. This becomes even clearer when we connect it to the interview's emphasis on low self-esteem. If both partners already possess fragile self-worth, conflict may no longer be processed as a discussion about a problem, but instead as a threat to identity, worth, or personal adequacy. A simple disagreement about household roles, trust, or unmet expectations can therefore be interpreted as rejection, criticism, or proof of one's inadequacy. This creates the perfect cognitive conditions for the kind of hostile thoughts identified by Eckhart et al., because individuals are no longer responding to the issue itself. They are reacting to what the conflict appears to say about them. In this sense, low self-esteem may function as a cognitive vulnerability factor that increases the likelihood of hostile attribution biases and emotional defensiveness. The communication findings from Bradley et al. Reinforce this interpretation. Their work showed that violence in situationally violent couples was reduced when couples improved friendship, conflict management, and communication skills, suggesting that healthier communication can interrupt the escalation pathway before it becomes abusive. This directly supports the guest's insight that the purpose of conflict should be problem-solving rather than winning. When arguments become competitions, each statement is more likely to be heard as an attack, especially by individuals with low self-esteem. However, when the focus shifts towards collaboratively resolving the issue, conflict becomes less threatening and less likely to activate defensive or retaliatory responses. Sinha et al. Adds an important structural and developmental layer to this discussion by showing that belief systems, autonomy, and relationship power dynamics influence IPV risk over time, particularly among adolescent married girls. While our guest suggested that broader societal structures may play a smaller role because abuse can be perpetrated by either gender, the article reminds us that social norms still shape how people understand power, conflict, and acceptable relationship behavior. So for example, beliefs that normalize blame, dominance, or personal inadequacy may interact with low self-esteem and poor communication to make conflict escalation more likely. Education of conflict resolution skills from a young age is important, as our guest also mentioned that it is more difficult to change one's mentality and attitudes towards conflict as the individual gets older. Taken together, the strongest takeaway is that IPV may emerge through an interaction between individual vulnerabilities, such as low self-esteem, cognitive distortions, which are hostile interpretations, situational accelerants like alcohol, and poor conflict management skills. This integrated perspective suggests that future research should move beyond studying conflict behaviors alone and examine how self-esteem shapes the way partners assign meaning to disagreement, criticism, and rejection. Understanding this may be key to explaining why some couples are able to navigate conflict constructively, while others rapidly escalate into toxic and potentially violent dynamics. So with that, we thank you for watching this episode of Buffalove Podcast. See you on the next episode. Bye bye.